Captain Laura Morgan stood at the airport's gate, watching her aircraft being prepped for takeoff. She had flown many times before, but today was different. Today, she would be the captain. After years of hard work, dedication, and countless hours in the cockpit, she had earned her wings as a commercial airline captain. The responsibility weighed on her shoulders, but it also filled her with pride. The early morning sky was clear, the weather perfect for flying, but that didn't mean the day would go smoothly. Laura had trained for this moment her entire career, but there were some things no simulator could prepare her for. The flight was scheduled from New York to London, a journey Laura had flown many times as a first officer. But today, she would sit in the left seat, commanding the aircraft. As she walked through the terminal, her uniform crisp and her hat tilted just right, she felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had always dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, reality felt different. Her first officer, Mark Taylor, greeted her with a smile as they walked toward the plane. "Ready for your big day, Captain?" he asked, a teasing edge in his voice. Laura smiled back, though inside, she could feel her heart beating a little faster. "As ready as I'll ever be." As they completed their pre-flight checks in the cockpit, everything seemed routine. The hum of the engines starting up was familiar and comforting, and Laura felt a sense of calm settle over her. But even as she ran through the checklist with Mark, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the 300 passengers who were trusting her to get them to their destination safely. The flight attendants finished their safety demonstration, the cabin doors were closed, and air traffic control cleared them for takeoff. Laura's hands gripped the controls as she prepared for her first takeoff as captain. The engines roared to life, and the plane sped down the runway, lifting off into the bright blue sky. Laura's heart soared along with the aircraft. The thrill of flight, the freedom, the power, was what had drawn her to this career in the first place. For a few moments, everything felt perfect, but perfection doesn't last long in aviation. Halfway across the Atlantic, Laura noticed something unusual. A warning light flashed on the control panel. It was the oil pressure in one of the engines, lower than it should have been. Laura's mind raced, recalling her training. Low oil pressure could be a sign of an impending engine failure, but it wasn't something that needed immediate action. "Not yet." Mark noticed it too. "Do you think it's serious?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. Laura's instincts kicked in. "We'll monitor it for now, but let's prepare for a possible shutdown." As they flew further across the ocean, the oil pressure continued to drop. Laura remained calm, but her mind was calculating the options. They were far from land, with only emergency diversion airports scattered across the Atlantic. Shutting down the engine wouldn't mean immediate danger, but it would complicate the landing. Minutes later, the decision was made for her. The engine's oil pressure dropped to critical levels, and Laura gave the command to shut it down. The hum of the engine on the right side faded, leaving the plane flying on one engine. The cabin remained quiet. No passengers knew yet, and Laura was determined to keep it that way. She spoke calmly into the intercom, informing the flight attendants of the situation and assuring them that everything was under control. As the plane cruised on one engine, Laura knew they would need to divert. She contacted air traffic control, requesting clearance to land at the nearest airport, which was in Shannon, Ireland. The controllers cleared them for the diversion, and Laura began the slow descent toward the Irish coast. Her mind was focused, calculating every step, every action. The passengers were still unaware of the engine shutdown, but Laura could feel the tension building in the cockpit. Mark worked with her seamlessly, following her lead as they prepared for the emergency landing. As they neared Shannon, Laura made the announcement to the passengers. Her voice was calm, steady, and professional as she explained that one of the engines had been shut down as a precaution and that they would be landing in Ireland instead of London. She assured them that everything was under control, but she could hear the nervous murmurs spreading through the cabin. The approach to Shannon was smooth, but Laura knew that landing on one engine required precision. She guided the plane down, the runway lights shining in the distance. Her hands were steady on the controls, her training taking over as she brought the aircraft in for a perfect landing. Once on the ground, the relief was palpable. The passengers cheered and clapped as the plane taxied to the gate. Laura exhaled deeply, allowing herself to relax for the first time since the engine had shut down. She had done it, her first flight as captain, and she had handled an emergency with grace and skill. But the day wasn't over yet. After the passengers had disembarked, Laura met with the maintenance team to inspect the engine. The cause of the oil pressure drop was a mechanical failure, something that couldn't have been predicted. Laura had made the right call. Back in the terminal, Laura sat with her crew, reflecting on the day's events. She had faced her first major challenge as captain and had come through it stronger. Her confidence in her abilities had grown, and she knew that this was just the beginning of her career as a captain. As the sun set over the Irish coast, Laura looked out at the runway, already thinking about her next flight. The sky was calling her, and she was ready to answer.